Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to this wonderful programming that we have for you today. The Charter for Compassion is hosting a panel discussion in collaboration with Voices for a Nuclear-Free World. So we give you a warm welcome to this space. I know that this is being streamed on our social media platforms as well. So if you're not joining us directly on Zoom, welcome to all of you watching us from different parts of the world, hopefully through different platforms on the internet. So my name is Anim, and I work with the Charter for Compassion. I am the Charter's global youth strategist, and I also have the deep privilege of serving on the Charter's board of trustees. And it is my distinct honor to be here today as the moderator of this wonderful panel. And in just a few short seconds, we're going to be going around and hearing from our panelists. Not a few short seconds, I should have said a few short minutes, because before that, we have a very special guest with us here today. But just to give everybody a quick brief about what we will be doing, we have 4 past recipients of a very prestigious award from Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. It is called the Gorbachev-Schultz Award, also the Youth Voices Award. So we have 4 past recipients who are going to be engaging us in dialogue around their experiences and their advocacy, especially when it comes to youth advocating for a world free of nuclear weapons. And it seems more pertinent than ever given the dark period that we find ourselves in the world today. And before that, it is my distinct honor to introduce Bishop William Swing, who is here with us today. Bishop Swing is a visionary leader who has dedicated his life to peace and global cooperation. He is a founding member of Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons, a movement committed to the urgent mission of nuclear abolition. His profound concern for the catastrophic threat of nuclear weapons led him to organize a symposium on nuclear disarmament in 1983 in San Francisco. Recognizing the need for sustained action, he gathered a distinguished group of scientists, policymakers, and advocates to confront this existential challenge, a mission that has since transcended and evolved into the powerful, ongoing work of Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. Bishop Swing is also the founder of the United Religions Initiative, the world's largest grassroots interfaith network dedicated to cultivating cooperation, ending religiously motivated violence, and building cultures of peace and justice. His legacy as a changemaker continues to inspire and mobilize people across generations to take action for a more just and peaceful world. It is a privilege and a deep honor to have him with us today to share his reflections. And with that, please join me in welcoming Bishop Swing to share his reflections.
Thank you, Anna. Good to be here. Mikhail Gorbachev, former president of the Soviet Union, and George Shultz, former United States Secretary of State, longed to see this day, March 26, 2025. Gorbachev, at the end of his life, joined Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons in order to promote young nuclear weapons abolitionists. George Shultz, on his 100th birthday, paused on his birthday, 100 years old. He paused to congratulate the first Youth Award winner. Kekashan, that was you. To see this first generation of Youth Award winners gathered together is not only a tribute to Gorbachev and Schultz, but it's a glimpse of the hope for the world. You all are an answer to prayer, a very specific prayer that we've said every day for 17 years, every month for 17 years, called the nuclear prayer. I'll say it right now. Let us pray. The beginning and the end are in your hands, O creator of the universe. And in our hands, you have placed the fate of this planet. We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will turn to you in sober fear and in intoxicating hope. We ask for your guidance, to share in your imagination in our deliberations about the use of nuclear force. Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over our Earth, your Earth, so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light. Bless all of us who wait today for your presence and who dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace and rightful equilibrium on earth. In the name of all that is holy, all that is hoped. Amen. The symbol that unites the four people who won this award, the symbol is a ginkgo leaf. I don't know if you can see it. It's a beautiful ginkgo. Over 700 years ago, some Chinese monks went to Japan and brought ginkgo leaves, ginkgo trees. When the atomic bomb hit Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, all the ginkgo trees were obliterated, all of them except 4. A few saplings of the remaining ginkgo trees were brought to San Francisco and planted in the Japanese tea garden in honor of George Schultz and his wife, Charlotte. Each one of the Youth Award winners has a gold-plated ginkgo leaf from one of those ancient and modern trees. They symbolize endurance, peace among all people of the world, and a world free of nuclear weapons. What Mikhail Gorbachev and George Shultz were hoping for, what the United Religions Initiative is hoping for, what the Charter for Compassion is hoping for, what Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons is hoping for, has been assembled here today, and that is a new generation of leadership, the next generation, stepping up to rid the world of its greatest threat. Welcome today. Proud to be here. Blessings to all. And thank you on OB.
Thank you so much, Bishop Swing. What a beautifully moving way to start this dialogue today. I know that I feel very centered after hearing you read out those truly powerful words. And thank you so much for actually showing us one of the ginkgo tree leaves. I think much of our discussion today is going to be centered on that beautiful metaphor. So with that, I'd like to welcome anybody who has just joined into this space. And I'd like to encourage the audience to interact with us in the chat. Maybe let us know where you're signing in from. And also, if you have any questions for our panelists or even for Bishop Swing, we will be addressing them towards the end of our panel discussion. So please feel free to keep them coming in the chat and we will get to them. And with that, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists here. We have Yokov, we have Kekisha, Michaela, and Vanessa. These are 4 wonderful individuals who have done so much advocacy in the field of nuclear disarmament, as we all know, given that they have been the recipients of this wonderful award. And I'd like to get started And I'm going to do my best not to talk as much because I'd like to share the space with our wonderful panelists here. And I'd like each of you maybe just to go around the room and, of course, introduce yourself to our lovely audience here. Let us know maybe where you are and the work you're doing today, but also go into really your experience of receiving the Youth Voices Award. And perhaps you could tell us what you were working on when you received the award and how your activism might have evolved from then to now. I know that all of you received the award at different times and in different years. So maybe a quick introduction. Let us know where you were and where you're at now from the time that you received the award. And if possible, if you could bring to mind maybe just one defining moment in your journey that really solidified your commitment to nuclear abolition and peace building. We'd love to hear just a few of those points from all of you. And I'll open it up to our panelists, whoever would like to go first, and then the others can jump in as needed.
I can start. Um, Thank you, Anam, for uh, the introductions, and hello, everyone. Really delighted to be here with all of you today. My name is Skehakasha. I am the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, and I was, as Bishop Swing mentioned, I was the first ever winner of the Voices Youth Gorbachev-Schultz Legacy Award. And for me, as someone who's been working on disarmament education for a peaceful and sustainable future for more than half my life, honestly, even like from before I founded Green Hope Foundation at the age of 12, this was just such a wonderful honor for me to be able to receive this recognition, this vindication of my belief that young people have the power to affect change in the nuclear disarmament movement, that we are not just people who can be pushed aside, who like this, this we're not just people that others take for granted, that oh my gosh, young people aren't going to do anything, yet we can just go ahead with our nuclear agenda because people don't know about what's going on. And so for me to receive this award, it was like, okay, I'm it's just a wonderful recognition of young people and the power that we as youth have to affect positive change. So, as I mentioned, I'm the founder president of Green Hope Foundation. We work in 28 countries with over 500,000 people on all aspects of sustainability. And what we see is that you can't ever achieve a sustainable future if you don't first work towards peace. And one of the biggest hurdles that lies in our way of achieving a peaceful world is, of course, nuclear weapons. And not just the weapons themselves, but the whole uh, form of nuclear colonialism, right from the cradle to like sourcing the materials required to make nuclear weapons, the mining, to all the way the waste siting. And so on the left is, the detonation of a nuclear bomb. And on the right is the ruined dome in the Marshall Islands that still to this day leaks radiation out into the soil and the water. This is in the Marshall Islands. It's filled with nuclear waste from all of the testing. And so when we see instances like this, we at Green Hope Foundation were like, how do we make sure that our, not just the present, like adults, that generation, but how do our younger generations know about this? How can we make sure that they grow up to become responsible, empathetic global citizens who are aware of the problem and who are able to then take action? Because honestly, one of the biggest threats, as we all know, is that people keep like saying that, oh my gosh, there's this veil of secrecy. So we have our We Want Books Not Nukes campaign. So that's been the foundation of the work that we do to ensure that disarmament education begins with peace education. And with that, we work to create a more sustainable future. And so that's evolved into, us having a peace song, us having debates, us ensuring that in every country that we work in, from Liberia to Kiribati to Bangladesh to all across the world, peace and thereafter disarmament forms an integral part of the discussion that we try to have with young people, teaching them about actions that they can take. And more importantly, we also want to make sure that we don't scare off children and young people. And so we use creative modes of communication like art, music, dance, drama, sport, eco-fashion, and writing to slowly and steadily introduce them to the topics that can seem very complicated right at the beginning, making sure that we're teaching them about peace and loving one another and knowing that they have a responsibility towards each other and towards the planet to do no harm, and utilizing these creative modes of communication to slowly introduce them to these topics and then gradually teach them about more complex, heart-wrenching topics like nuclear weapons and disarmament. And of course, taking that to the highest levels of policymaking, where whether it's addressing the United Nations or speaking at the Voices URI conferences, or bringing off the peace spell, or having conversations with the UN Secretary General, or moderating the International Day of Peace the official student celebration. So yeah, that is who I am, what we've done. And I think in terms of a defining moment, I think for me, just learning about it myself gradually every single day, how important peace and disarmament is to this whole, achievement of sustainability. That for me, it's like not just one moment, but a constant growth that has defined the work I've done. And yeah, which led me to win the award and continue to my advocacy to create a nuclear weapons free world. So yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kekasha, for sharing that with us. And I'd love to pass it over to Yogav or Michaela or Vanessa, whoever feels ready.
I'll jump in. My name is Yogev Van Kundra, and I'd also like to introduce, this is a 2-month-old Chai, one of 33 goats I have here on my farm. I live in Virginia in the United States in the Appalachian Mountains, close to the Tennessee and North Carolina borders. And in the mountains here, we have a lot of beautiful nature, and my farm, the way that I farm is in unison with the land. And what the defining moment for me was in 2023 that really solidified my commitment to the nuclear disarmament movement, fulfilling one of my lifelong dreams of owning my own farm and farming the land. There, I learned about a facility in near where I live in Irwin, Tennessee, called Nuclear Fuel Service. They are a nuclear power plant that also produces all the nuclear fuel for the nuclear navy. So they've had a long decades of connection with the military-industrial complex. The nuclear navy, if people aren't familiar, is about almost half of the United States Navy is like fueled by nuclear fuel. So not just some of the nuclear navy has as part of the nuclear triad with nuclear weapons and so forth, but also talking about the fuel that runs these Navy vessels. But this facility, in addition to that, in 2023, was undergoing a permitting process to try to get a permit in order to produce highly enriched uranium at 95% or more to create more powerful nuclear weapons and the modernization of the U.S. nuclear arsenal. And it was, for me, in part, a like not in my backyard kind of fight. And why I first started getting involved is because concerns. I used to live in central Pennsylvania near 3 Mile Island. So, I know the risks of what a nuclear facility can have on the impacting the environment, and trying to produce healthy food here on my farm. But it was really more than that. It was not in anybody's backyard, because this came out of, we live about 3 hours away from Oak Ridge, is the government-owned massive facility here in the United States that has produced or been a part of the entire nuclear arsenal for all of that history here in the United States. And they had tried to get that process established in there, and there was a group, the Oak Ridge Environmental REPA, Environmental Protection, and they fought against that and were able to stop that process there. So then they tried to do it here in our community, and we're connected with the REPA, and I was volunteering at the time with our local organization, the Appalachian Peace Education Center, and so we're trying to finding this local issue, but being connected with our larger movement and saying, no, we don't want more nuclear weapons. And we want to, I appreciated Karkashan talking about, it's not just the bombs themselves, but it's also the waste that comes afterwards and the entire destruction cycle of nuclear. So here in my community, we were impacted and had connection to the beginning stages of how nuclear bombs were being made. And so it was in 2023 that I submitted a public comment in opposition of the permit they were trying to get in order to do this highly enriched uranium. And in response to my public comment, I addressed the concerns about how we don't need more nuclear weapons, concerns about the environmental impacts we know about the uranium and plutonium radiation coming specifically from this power facility, and the impacts that would potentially have on my farm and so forth. In response to me submitting my public comment, and it was early in the public comment period that had just gone live maybe a few days prior, and many more comments were coming in weeks and a month later, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission accidentally leaked their draft decision, which ended up being their final decision, word for word, that they had already decided that they were going to grant this permit. And it was shocking to me because reading that draft decision was things like, oh, this has nothing to do with bomb making. They're not making bombs at their facility. And comments like mine that came in afterwards addressing that, what else are we using highly enriched uranium for but bomb making? We know that this facility is connected to bomb making and so forth. So it really felt like a breach of our democracy and a direct insult to me and all the other people submitting public comments, saying that our voices don't matter in this case, and that it was just kind of a puppet show, that they care and that we're going to take our opinions into their decision whether or not to grant this permit. And so my community, I really started to become more involved, and we requested a public hearing. Were denied, so we held our own public hearing, and we had over 100 people showing up. We had speakers from all over, including people part of the nuclear disarmament movement, citizen scientists who studied the impacts in the local community and so forth, and just kind of kept building momentum from there, doing protests and rallies, going to town halls and so forth, and really making that a gathering point for the nuclear disarmament movement. And from there, the work's just really evolved. Now I'm staff with the Appalachian Peace Education Center, and we're working for peace in a lot of ways. And one of our focuses now is it's wherever we can have influence, I think, is where we're most impactful and most exciting. And our government in the United States is largely funding the war against Gaza and Palestinians, and so that's been another point. And what's evolved from this work that I'm doing is really going more into my Jewish roots and my connection to Israel and so forth. My name Yogev means farmer, or one who cultivates the land. It's a very common Israeli name. It's my Hebrew name. And I'm excited about this webinar to talking about the intergenerational. And I've really been able to pull my great grandmother, Sarah, who I've never met, who was an anti-racist labor peace activist long before me, and finding a song that she composed about peace in the Middle East, and kind of drawing from different people in my life to continue this work for peace. It's an honor to have received this award, and an honor to sit with so many other young people influencing change. Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yoga, for sharing that. I think it's so deeply inspiring and also moving to hear of everything that transpired when you were getting into the work of this advocacy, and to really see how you're manifesting all of those strengths into the work that you're doing right now, particularly with what is unfolding in the world today. And I think with that, I know we have Michaela and Vanessa as well. So Michaela, maybe you want to share first, and then we'll hand over to Vanessa, if that's okay.
So I'm Michaela, and it's really an honor to be on a panel with everyone here today. I'm sorry I'm sounding a bit nasally. I've been a bit under the weather, so excuse me. But yeah, I started off my nuclear disarmament journey a bit by chance back in 2020, when the world was shut down due to COVID-19. And I was desperately looking for an internship in gender, peace, and security. And thankfully, the Czech Republic wasn't all that shut down at that point. So I ventured to Prague to join PNND, the Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, to start my internship to complete my master's in international relations and development. And it was an amazing experience. I was working alongside such amazing youths, and learning and from so many people who are more well seasoned in the nuclear disarmament and peace space. And it was just such an awe-inspiring environment to be in. Really, dynamic people and so much to learn. And I had no idea about nuclear disarmament before this. Literally, I was just looking for gender, peace, and security, and it led me down a very interesting road. But I definitely got hooked on how much sense everything made, and I couldn't believe how much money and resources were just being wasted on things that were never meant to be used in the first place, just for some ridiculous security assurances or non-assurances. And another thing I learned was just, nuclear disarmament was really just the tip of the iceberg. So the more I delved in, the more I could see how interconnected it was to other issues, which is very interesting. So about midway into my internship with PNND, a bunch of us other interns and related youths decided that we were tired of being the only young people in the room, and often never really heard or listened to. So Youth Fusion was born. So my co-conveners, Vanda, Marjan, and Nico, we all poured our energy and our souls into Youth Fusion to create something really, really special. And we were really unique in that we took this intersectional, interdisciplinary, and intergenerational approach to nuclear disarmament, as each of us had our own unique interests, expertise, and insights to offer. So we didn't want to limit ourselves, we didn't want to exclude anybody, and we really wanted to fit all the pieces of nuclear disarmament together into our puzzle, right? So very, very broad focus, but still focused on nuclear disarmament at the end of the day. So it was really fantastic, and I think we did a really good job of this from around 2020 to 2023. And we covered topics such as, nuclear disarmament, colonial history, and I can see Agarim is in the audience today. She also contributed to that. We also did a lot of stuff on gender, peace, and security, concerns about nuclear weapons in space, cybersecurity, arms control, and really so much more. We had a lot of interests to cover. But one of our main pillars was intergenerational dialogue. And this was also, I believe, a strong reason as to why we won this award. Because we have so much to learn from the more seasoned members of the nuclear disarmament and peace field. We all valued our mentors and all the colleagues, and we even ran a podcast series dedicated to intergenerational dialogue. And I hosted a few of them. And while I was always left very inspired and encouraged about what everyone had to say, there was always a little bit of a pit at the bottom of my stomach, as I never quite really saw how I could get there. And this kind of brings me to where I am now, the communications coordinator at Think Network, which is not in the nuclear disarmament field or the peace field at all, actually. I haven't been actively involved in the space for over a year and a half now. And as I think a lot of you know, Youth Fusion has been shut down also for the past year and a half. But it has been taken up by some other inspiring youth. So I think you'll hear more about Youth Fusion in the coming weeks or months. But I think after winning the award, I think all the Youth Fusion members had to take a break. We had to pay our bills. I think a lot of us were very burnt out by the end of our sort of journey of Youth Fusion. And while the team and I were extremely honored to receive this award and truly validated and over the moon about it, it was a little bit bittersweet for us because, as I said, we were all completely burnt out at that point. Most of us, I think all of us at that point, were not really able to secure a properly paid role in this field. And we really came to a breaking point where we just simply couldn't continue. So I think my point here is, while it's very important and really nice to receive these special awards, and we're so grateful that Youth Fusion and our work was awarded with such an honor, it did feel just a little bit empty at the end because we were not able to sustain our work. And I think personally, as a youth in this field who is aging out of this category soon enough, I felt extremely unsupported and hopeless a lot of the time. My personal final straw was at the NPT RevCon in August 2023 when I was part of a civil society event that was aimed at discussing how to move forward in the nuclear disarmament space. And I brought up the big elephant in the room that youths were overqualified, were working relentlessly, and were so passionate about a future free of nuclear weapons. But we need to get paid, right? And I thought that I would get constructive feedback from the elders in the room and maybe some agreement. But instead, I got comments like, well, if we started paying people, it would corrupt the community. And a few of them also pointed out that they weren't paid. But, there were also elder people who were living off of inheritances and pensions. So it just was a little bit hurtful. And there were literally other youths beside me in the room crying and in tears because it was just so frustrating and hurtful to hear that response when we raised an important issue for young people. And it was just not taken seriously at all. And we kind of felt a little bit even, like scolded for even bringing it up. And that's when I started writing my articles for the Atomic Reporters and the European Leadership Network on how grossly youths are exploited in this field. And it got a lot of support from youths. I heard it like ruffled a few feathers of the more seasoned people in the field. But I think the message I would like to leave with today is that the whole intergenerational approach goes both ways. Young people have a lot to learn, but older people in this field also have a lot to gain from us. And we also really need your support because I think too many people have really dropped out of this field because they just simply can't sustain themselves. So I think that's not the uplifting message of a lot of people on the panel today. I'm a bit jaded, as you can tell, but I am still very passionate about nuclear disarmament, and I love the community. I mean, I've made lifelong friends, which it was definitely not a waste of time by any means. And if I ever get an opportunity, I'll jump right back in. But I think it's definitely a big thing that we all need to really find solutions for. I'm not here to just be all doom and gloom, but I think we do need to take it seriously. If we can't pay people to do their jobs and make an impact, I live in Copenhagen, which is like Europe's most expensive city. And my rent is ridiculous. I need to have a full-time paid job. So I think youths are really owed that. And I think it's about time that we, stop having to do unpaid internships that we go into debt for. And yeah, so that's the end. I hope we can have some maybe some brainstorming after this at some point. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any solutions.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you so much for your honesty. And I think it's there from what I'm seeing in the chat as well. I think a few people here, and I'm hoping more than just a few, agree with me when I say that it's so deeply important to share the reality or a facet of reality for some in this experience. And I think what you've said hits all the right notes for anybody who identifies as youth right now and are working in different sectors of any kind of advocacy work. So thank you so much. But having said that, it's still deeply inspiring to hear about your journey and the transition from youth voices to what you're doing now. And I would like to let everybody know that Michaela's articles are fantastic, and hopefully she can share them in the chat for those to read, a link maybe. But yes, I'd love for you to expand more on that, Michaela, maybe when we get to some other questions in the panel discussion. Thank you again for sharing with so much heart and vulnerability. And we're going to go to Vanessa now.
Thank you so much for, first of all, for having me here, Charters and Voices, but also to Michaela for your courage, because it takes courage for a young person to come here and openly share these struggles that we all face. And following up a little bit on what you said, one of the challenges that I faced and that we worked on a lot in my role at ICANN to address was the fact that a lot of times young people, when they want to, are not considered experts enough to express themselves on this topic, because there's a lot of technicalities, there's a lot of ins and outs, there's a lot of acronyms that a lot of times we don't really know when you come in as a young person. So in my role at ICANN, one issue, one challenge that we tried to address was exactly this. We're still addressing it. And how I am doing so is by giving young people agency, by giving them not just the education and the tools to learn more about these issues. Because to be quite frank, sometimes it's not, this field isn't really accessible to people who haven't either done a certain path of education or haven't been in certain professional paths. You don't really understand the ins and outs of international security and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, what is a REFCON. So with the work that I do in social media, I try to break down all these barriers, these accessibility barriers, and explain to people that at the root of this issue is that nuclear weapons are harmful, is that they're going to harm each and every one of us, is that they're going to touch each and every one of us if one nuclear weapon is detonated. And therefore, all our voices matter, and especially young people, we are just as experts, we are just as knowledgeable. And one thing that Michaela said, but applies to the other awareness in the room, who I'm really super honored to be here with right now, is that young people are also really qualified. It's not just about being passionate and loving what we do, but we are also really qualified. We have the degrees, we have the experiences, but unfortunately, it's a lot of non-paid experience and not much is professional. I always tell people that I feel very blessed and very lucky to do the work that I do at ICANN, to be able to do something that I'm so passionate about and still get paid for it, to be able to cover my bills by doing something that I'm so passionate about, that I so deeply love. So to the question, what was I doing when I received the award and what am I doing now? I was working with ICANN. I'm still working with ICANN as the social media officer. Big part of my role, as I mentioned, is trying to break those accessibility barriers in terms of education and knowledge on the topic, but also provide the tools. And the way we provide the tools, echoing some of the work that the other award winners do, is by giving people actions and ways that they can concretely move and influence policy. One of the things that I'm most passionate about and that I've noticed is how civil society, especially in the nuclear disarmament sphere, is quite strong and has a say. And when it comes to civil society, youth play an important role in civil society. And a lot of us are tech savvy, a lot of us are social media people. And so that is where we show our power. That is where we show our strength. And one thing that I've really loved and that I've been really proud of in my time at ICANN is to see how that shift has happened through the educational materials that we share, through the campaigns that we run, just not us, but also in partnership with other international organizations like the United Nations, or other individuals that we work with in the sector. And part of the ICANN work that we do is also working with artists. So finding new and different avenues to try and encourage and involve more people in the work that we do. And speaking of artists, I am one of those, and I'm really honored to have one of my art pieces having been featured in this. Oh, apologies for the blare. I'll share the link maybe in the chat. because my background is blurred, so you can't really see it. But I'll probably share the link in the chat. But wanted to quickly shout out Artists Against the Bomb, which is an incredible project, which all aims through a collection of posters that is created by Pedro Reyes in his studio to educate people about nuclear disarmament. So it's all about breaking down the barriers and showing people that even if you haven't had a certain career education or path, you can still be part of the conversation. Don't want to take too much space, but this is what I do in terms of communications on the youth side, because I'm really passionate about youth as well. I do work with two youth still work with several youth organizations that cover different areas of the world, different regions of the world, both from indigenous communities to affected communities. And I was really excited to hear that my friend Egedim is in the room, because she is one of the people. She's from originally Kazakhstan, for those who might not hear her. Quick Google search of her name and you see the incredible work that she does. But I bring her up also because she's one of the defining moments of my career and my reason to be part of this movement. As someone whose family and whose generation was affected, seeing the work that she does, the resilience that she puts in, and the passion and the heart that she puts in everything that she does, despite still living with the consequences, the devastating consequences of nuclear weapons, her drive and her force gives me strength. And like her, many other people that I'm really honored to call friends in the field are my defining moments.
Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. And please do share the link to your wonderful piece in the chat. It's just so wonderfully overwhelming, I'm going to say, to take in all four of your different journeys to this. And I've just been reflecting while you guys have all been speaking. And Vanessa, just to start with what you said, I think there's so much power in being able to be in a position that does support you. And I love how we're getting to see both sides of the coin. But more than that, I see so much deep alignment in what all four of you have shared, which is really your passion for nuclear disarmament. Clearly, as you have all been past recipients of this amazing, honorable award. But I want to build a little deeper on what I could hear in what all four of you have said. And this question, I'm going to preface it with a general notion that we are often presented with. I think there is so much talk around nuclear disarmament. And of course, cognitively, we all know that it is probably the most pressing issue in the world. However, often it loses sight in terms of its deep importance to the magnitude of the destruction that could come from an unfortunate event that we have witnessed not so long ago in the past with the dropping of atomic bombs. And there are so many different nuclear identities and forms of countries that have that power. So for our audience today and anybody else who is watching through our different streaming platforms, what would be your message, particularly to those who might not know too much about the process of really advocating for nuclear disarmament? And more importantly, I think tying that answer into, and I bring this up because I know Yogav, you brought it up, and Kekishan, you did too, and Michaela and Vanessa, and I'm seeing so much intersectionality with different global justice issues, whether that is the genocide in Palestine, whether that's climate change, whether that is human rights on its own stage. I think there's so much intersectionality, and it all boils down to a form of really advocating for nuclear disarmament. So I think the question I'm really asking here is, how do you see this big issue of nuclear disarmament as really the foundational piece of these global justice issues? And what would be your message for not just young people, but anybody who is with us today or watching or will watch later, to give this issue the importance that it actually deserves? And I'm not going to call anyone out, so whoever feels comfortable to jump in, please do.
I'm happy to jump in. And first of all, thank you for that question. I think it's really insightful, and I'm really happy that intersection is a word that has come in the room and is a topic that has come in the room. The way I see the nuclear weapon issue is that it's an existential threat. If a nuclear weapon is dropped today, nothing else is going to matter. Everything is gone, everything is destroyed, nothing else is going to matter. However, it's not in a silo. The nuclear disarmament issue, it's not a silo issue. It's connected with all the other social justice issues. And that is why the word intersection is so important. And specifically when it comes to the issue of climate and nuclear weapons, that is where I see a quite an even deeper link to an extent. And the reason I say an even deeper link, because both of them are existential threats, both climate change and nuclear weapons, and they exacerbate each other. Similarly, with other social issues as well. With the decolonization of the African continent, which is something that I'm really passionate about, with racism, which is another one that I'm really passionate about, with gender equity, they all exacerbate the nuclear disarmament issue, and climate change does the same thing. So on one hand, the nuclear disarmament issue. See, I'm missing words because they all work together. The nuclear disarmament issue is a really, really as you put it, Anam, it's a huge issue because of the consequences and what a nuclear weapon would do. However, it doesn't stand in a silo. It's connected with all the other issues. And one thing that I love to share is that one of the reasons that I am still part of this movement and nuclear disarmament, and I still very passionately advocate for the elimination of nuclear weapons, is that when I'm advocating to eliminate nuclear weapons, I'm advocating for a better environment. I'm advocating for the decolonization of the African continent. And advocating for anti-racist work. And in fact, my art piece centers on that, and a quote by James Baldwin that says that the atom bomb and racism are, two existential threats that are gonna ruin mankind as God made it. So yeah, both all the issues are very, very interconnected for me. They don't stand in silos.
I can jump in. Yeah, just absolutely agreeing with that. I think anyone working on this issue becomes very obvious to us that we can't just have a single solution to this, because the problem that we're dealing with is it's not just like one problem, it's many, many interconnected problems. And as Vanessa just mentioned, it's like they amplify one another. And one of the first things that I think about when I think of how is this an intersectional problem? The ruined dome example that I gave when I was speaking earlier in the Marshall Islands. I mean, that is an environmental disaster, and that it happened because the nuclear waste in 1977, when the U.S. was testing nuclear weapons there, like the waste there was buried in this dome, and now it's like because of climate change, there are cracks appearing in that dome. And so, this waste is now leaking out into the water, into the soil. You're seeing clams that are radioactive. And obviously the people who are living, the indigenous people living there, are the ones who are suffering because they're drinking this water that is radioactive, food that is radioactive. So, it's an example of how this whole process of nuclear colonialism just affects every single person. It affects the environment. And if it can happen in one place, it can definitely happen in another environment, another community as well. Even I'm from Canada. I'm from Toronto, but like in Western Canada, for instance, the uranium that was mined to create the two atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that was mined by the Dene people of Western Canada, and with no regard at all for their well-being, for the fact that they could get sick, that they could suffer from the consequences of dealing with radioactive material. And very few people even know about that. Their plight isn't talked about. And it's something that when I think about how this is an intersectional issue, I always, share that little tidbit about like, how these weapons came into being. It was literally people who, again, had to sacrifice their lives and who died as a result of this nuclear colonialism. So I think that as young people, and we're already, very, very interconnected, we already work on so many different types of issues. I think this is one of our superpowers that we have to kind of shed light on all of these different connections that exist to various movements. So whether that is the feminist movement advocating for gender equality, whether that is working on climate and advocating for climate action, or whether that's the disarmament movement, there are always interconnections that exist. And more importantly, people who are passionate about creating a better world for all, who are passionate about achieving peace within their own spheres of influence and across the world. And when I talk about, when we say, disarmament education, this forms a very important part of our work, because it's not just separately, oh, here you go, this is nuclear disarmament, and then we move on to other topics and we never talk about it again. It's literally connected to every single aspect that we teach the children that we work with about. So how can, whether that's like, we were talking about renewable energy, or we were talking about like, mangrove restoration, and then we talk about disarmament, and it's like the children that we work with get this really kind of all-round intersectional holistic idea of what it means to be a responsible global citizen and what it means to achieve sustainability in the long term. So that's how I see intersectionality within this movement, and it's something that we enforce within within our disarmament education programs as well. And this ensures that the young people grow up to become leaders who, or they're already leaders, but grow up to become leaders who make informed decisions that benefit society as a whole.
Yeah, well put. To add to that, I mean, sharing my story, intersectionality has been like, I think single issue politics is kind of dead for me. Our movements are so interconnected, and like with the environmental justice connection for me with the nuclear bomb making facility in my community, but really appreciate what others are sharing with race and gender. It's really an honor to be here on this panel with so many brilliant women. I think that women and young women and girls are really a huge force in this movement. We also know that girls and women are also disproportionately impacted by radiation and Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then on nuclear tests, how they're impacted more, and also I think are really powerful force in our movement. So I think our greatest challenge in the nuclear disarmament movement is staying relevant with so many things happening here in the United States. I think also likewise throughout the world, we're facing moving away from democracy and towards dictatorship and authoritarianism. And so there's a lot going on in the United States where people are really, there's so much to be concerned about. It's almost easy to get lost. But I think our challenge of staying relevant with so many issues also becomes an opportunity and a strength of our movement because of intersectionality, that we can connect with so many other movements and say, hey, we are all united for peace and justice. And that's really been a core of the Appalachian Peace Education Center. The organization that I've worked with has been around for 43 years, active very much in the Vietnam War. And since our foundation, we've always been engaged in anti-racist work. And that's, I think, really important, especially hearing Kirkishan share about the impacts of indigenous people, Asian American peoples that were really impacted by a lot of testing, like in the Marshall Islands that we've heard about. And then of course in Africa as well with nuclear colonization. I think that race is absolutely like connected in so many ways I could talk more about. But yeah, I think that how can we make it an opportunity and use education to further all of our movements and everything we care about? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add a short little end note. I think one of the biggest things, the biggest intersections that is just so overarching for me is just like how undemocratic nuclear weapons are, like who voted for them. They don't seem to be tied to any, particular party. It's just kind of this given thing that, whoever you vote for and whatever nuclear, armed country will just, it's not a negotiable. It's just something that's there. And I think oftentimes I'm like, where's the, civil society discussion on this? Do people get a say in, potentially being blown up? I mean, it's just a bit ridiculous. So I think my advice is also to just really, look at the democratic aspects of it and, really put that message through. But also another point is, I don't know if you've been to these I assume a lot of you have probably been to these civil society forums and like the UN or whatever conferences going on. But I think a lot of people who are in the civil society forum are just kind of stuck there, and like diplomats and MPs don't come down. And if they do, it's like one guy who's just, a friend of someone and they're just agreeing with you, but they have no power to do anything over policy. So my question is also like, how can we kind of, break out of our echo chamber in civil society and, influence policy and start to get that ball rolling? Because there's no, politicians or MPs or anyone like I've engaged with a few from the UK, and like it's just, it's not a negotiable. So how do we kind of break out of our bubble? Because it's all nice that we can agree with each other, and of course we do. We all have the same goal, but we need to talk to people who don't. How do we like get over that bridge? Like how do we get the movement to actually put a dent in something? Because I think just militarism in general, the way it's going in a lot of big economies like the US and the UK and a lot of Europe now, we're scaling up. I mean, in Denmark, we've added so much to our defense budget. I didn't vote for that, but it's for the nation state security. We have to do it. And I get, obviously we need to be a bit realistic sometimes. We do have actual threats, but I think all these threats, just we create them. So how do we, talk to politicians and like, yeah, get people to think differently about things and not be so stressed about the imagination of the nation state, or yeah, whatever they're concerned about.
If I may just jump in very quickly, just wanted to add like one of the biggest barriers that exist, like why civil society would kind of vote for this or wouldn't, is because just the lack of awareness that's there. And like, when I'm talking about disarmament education, and we see it's not just the need for children to know about it, even like, young adults or adults themselves, where it's like this whole it's put forward by the nuclear arms industry that we need nuclear weapons for security. And so there's this veil of secrecy that exists. So people literally don't know what the threat of nuclear weapons is. They just think that it's because, oh, you need security, and the nuclear states that do have it, they promote it as a way of, protecting their people. And so, of course, people are going to, if they don't have the awareness, they're going to be like, oh, okay, it's protecting us, but not going beyond that. And so that is like, I just wanted to like jump in and say that the awareness for a lot of people isn't there. For us, it is there. We know about it. And that's why, we're doing slowly and steadily. And it's such a, a difficult process, like an uphill battle we're trying to fight, because it's like, yeah, of course, there's horrible things happening around the world. How can we see this change take root? But yeah, slowly and steadily making sure that everyone is aware, because with knowledge comes the power to act, and like kind of going over that first barrier of awareness, and then kind of saying, okay, how do we then, vote for the right people, elect people who are passionate about truly achieving peace, who are passionate about disarmament and can actually affect change. And yeah, so I just wanted to jump in and talk about that awareness piece, because we need awareness and knowledge to be able to act. And sadly, that's not the case around the world.
Thank you. Thank you to all four of you for shedding so much light on the idea of this, or rather than idea, the fact that this is also deeply intersectional. And for anyone who thinks this issue doesn't affect them, then unfortunately they're highly incorrect on that stand. So thank you to really speaking to those those issues. And Michaela, I think what you brought up is so interesting. And Kekishan, thank you so much for stepping in, because my next question was actually going to be about I know it's great to go deeper into, what the issues are and what is blocking anyone's path to be able to, Kekishan, like you said, really achieve that awareness, right? But for those who are listening and actually have an aspiration to get involved in the movement, or just simply for their own personal well-being of interest, given that this is the most pressing issue of our global security at the moment, what one or two action items that the four of you, from your experience, having walked this path and continuing to walk it with so much grace, might I add, what would you guys tell our audience, for young people or even those who are not young, who want to get involved and really want to support nuclear disarmament in their communities, in their countries? What would your advice be in terms of an action item to them?
I can just like from my experience, like personally, for me, the way I got introduced to it was because my parents were very, very aware, and they were the ones who like through storytelling introduced me as a child to the atrocities that were committed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but kind of starting out with peace and love for one another. And like I started my work at that age as well, like around 7, 8. So like I was already committed to create, wanting to create a better world, because I didn't want people to die or animals and plants to die. And so the way I would kind of tell my friends about it was like just through storytelling, through art, for instance, engaging them at that age to make sure that, okay, they were also aware of what was going on, because I realized when I spoke to my friends about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were like, what? No, we don't know about that, because we were like 9 years old. But I did, because my parents had told me about it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to slowly introduce this to them, because it's something that they should know. And so it was like, that was how I had done it. And now when we work with through Green Hope Foundation, we are always like, how do we kind of take that extra step towards ensuring that young people know about this? And one way that we recognize that it's important to kind of move forward with disarmament education is not just always directly going to be like, okay, we're here to talk about nuclear disarmament, because clearly it is seen as a taboo topic in many parts of the world still. There's the issue that we were talking about earlier with, promoted as this really important thing for national security. So it's dangerous to talk about it. And so, again, we try to slowly and steadily move ahead with relating it to these intersectional topics that link back to disarmament, like peace, like environmental injustices, things that, we are not directly saying, oh, we are here to dismantle nuclear colonialism, but we are talking about it indirectly and then directly by first addressing other topics that aren't seen as, as taboo. So that is like what I would like, that my advice for young people, whether you're no matter where you are, or just like people in general interested in advocating for nuclear disarmament, that, of course you can go like straight on ahead and work entirely towards disarmament, but also just if you want to slowly and steadily come into the movement, see where all of these injustices lie in all of these different intersectional areas. If it might not be safe for you to work towards disarmament within your community, that would probably be like a better way for you to work, so that you're safe, your family's safe, but at the same time you're advocating and working on something that actually creates positive change. Yeah, so I guess that would be my advice based on like how I worked and how Green Hope Foundation now works.
I'll follow up on Keishan's answer because you mentioned something that hit the nail on the head in terms of my advice. When the last statement that you made on kind of finding something that is close to home and making sure that home is okay. I would go a step further and say that one way of advocating for it and raising awareness about it, as Keishan rightly mentioned, is it doesn't always have to be directly on the nuclear weapons issue. It can come from another angle in a way that has been very effective for us to advocate about it on social media, but just simply for me to speak to the issue to my friends or strangers that I meet on the street is linking it to, again, something that is close to home, an issue that is very close to home. During the COVID pandemic, a very big issue that we had here, or just across the world in general, the most affected countries, our healthcare systems were crashing. They were breaking down because they couldn't handle the pandemic. However, in the year that the world was being crumbled by the COVID-19 pandemic, the 9 nuclear armed states were investing billions on their nuclear arsenals, when all that money could have gone to social infrastructures, could have gone to getting more masks, could have gone to getting more vaccines for the people that needed it, could have gone to mental health facilities that were so much needed all across the world, right? But I live in the UK, so myself and some of my friends were struggling a lot with this, and the social infrastructures that we have around us weren't giving us the support that we needed. And it wasn't their fault, but it's because they're underfunded. And they're underfunded because our government has misplaced priorities and is investing our hard-earned taxpayer money into maintaining weapons that they always claim must never be used. Because every single leader of a nuclear let me not provide misinformation here, so a little step back. But we have had several leaders of nuclear armed states come out and publicly say that nuclear arms are nuclear weapons that must never be used again. Obama said it when he went to Hiroshima. I'm sure we've had other heads of states of nuclear armed states in one way or another say the same message. These are weapons that did terrible harms and must never be used again. But if they must never be used again, then why are we spending hundreds of billions proliferating them? Where is the connect? So going back to advice to people, pick an issue that is close to home, because that is what people will resonate with, and tell them how the nuclear weapons issue is affecting this other issue that is close to home. Another way, very biased as a social media manager, is social media, right? We need more people to know about this. And linking to what Michaela said at the start as well about getting out of the bubble, our social media bubble, because it is true sometimes when you go to meetings at the UN or in other forums, you do see that civil society is isolated and kind of the diplomats are on one side, even though I can, as the civil society coordinators when it comes to TPNW meetings, one of the things that we strive to do is to bridge that gap. And so when you come to some of the TPNW meetings, you will see civil society engaging and lobbying diplomats, because we brief people on how to do that, how to talk to your missions, how to talk to your members of parliament. But it all links to awareness. It all links to us briefing them. It all links to us providing the educational tools, but not just us. When I say ICANN, I mean the over 700 partner organizations that work with ICANN, right? So it's over 700 partner organizations across all the world that are working on this issue. So ICANN kind of represents that umbrella. But when I talk about organizations in the field at UN meetings, at TPNW meetings that are doing this work, it's not just ICANN, so to speak, but it's the MEI Foundation and Youth Fusion when they were still there, and it's Eureka when we do the work. So definitely providing awareness. If you want concrete steps on how to take actions and things you can do, like lobbying your member of parliament, because one very important issue that was raised here that I'm really happy about was the agency that we hold as voters when it comes to national politics. Why is the nuclear weapons isn't a hot issue when elections are coming up? Because there's not much awareness, as Keishan mentioned. And therefore learning more about this issue is a first step. But once you've learned about it, go a step further. share it with friends, share it on social media. I'm always constantly trying to find and create new and innovative ways to share this information, to make it more accessible. So if you see an icon or a nuclear ban Instagram post, share it with a friend. That is already an action. You will already help in the movement that way, because the more people know, the more awareness there is, the more people can ask these questions we are asking, the more people can lobby their members of parliament. The third step and final thing that I'm going to say is that at ICANN, we also offer support in terms of, again, concrete actions that you can take, from lobbying your member of parliament to asking your bank why they are investing your money in nuclear weapons, to doing lobbying at the UN, to organizing art exhibitions with Artists Against the Bomb to raise awareness. There's a lot of resources. So please do head to ICANN's either social media accounts that I handle, or just to the website, and you will find different resources for different interests, as a way to start the journey.
Yeah, I can go next. So I think there are also a lot of simple, manageable things that you can do. Just like having a conversation around a dinner table with some friends. You can start, you never know what kind of ripple effect that you might have. And you can, for example, ask them, like Vanessa said, what bank are you part of? And I've done that with a few of my friends. And then they say, oh, well, I have a Dance Bank, and they're notorious for like whitewashing and lots of terrible things, but they also invest in nuclear weapons. So there's a lot of reasons to get them to change banks. So that's been very useful. Just, mouth, what is it, a word of mouth? That's very effective. And also, as Kekashana has said many times, like educate yourself, raise awareness. It's very powerful. And I think also I think a lot of people are very surprised to find out how welcoming the nuclear disarmament community is. I think there are a lot of groups and organizations and NGOs that are very they're kind of hungry to look for people who to snatch up and get on board and use their skills. It's not as difficult as you might think. As a young person, you might think it's very like inaccessible or whatever, but I do think there are like a lot of groups. I know Youth Fusion is coming up again. Nuclear Eureka also has a lot of cool stuff going on. So, do some research, find your NGO, and just send them a message, find a person. I think they're all on like LinkedIn and Insta, and then see if they have space or capacity. And I'm sure that you can find your little space to make some impact.
Yeah, so great ideas with education, action, intersectionality, finding local issues, and so forth. One thing that I'll add, grassroots level, I would say building meaningful relationships. So like what Michaela's talking about, just like having friends over for dinner or whatever. It's like, find people that you're already connected with, and then also building those meaningful connections and I think it can be quite complex and scary to kind of get going, but to simplify it, somebody asked recently the Dalai Lama, like, what is it that I can do? And he put it so beautifully and simply: critical thinking followed by intentional action.
Thank you so much. I love that, by the way, Yoga, critical thinking followed by intentional action. It's so articulate and so deeply true. Thank you to all four of you for really sharing, I think, what we could certainly classify as concrete steps. I would like to ask if the four of you are comfortable to share your contact information, and maybe we can put it in the chat. And Vanessa, for example, you mentioned ICANN, if you could pop in the website, and Kekashan, if you want to pop in your organizations as well, in case anybody wants to reach out directly to our panelists, please feel free to do so. I know we have about 15 minutes left, and we do have, I think, 1 or 2 questions that have come in from the audience. But before we get to that, I'd like to ask maybe just one last question, and then Bishop Swing, I'd love to ask if you have any questions or any thoughts before we wrap up. But just to our panelists, I know that so much of our dialogue has been around how do we propel forward this movement, and how do we really invite people to this advocacy work, which is the need of the hour? And Michaela, you spoke about the importance of the intergenerational aspect, and of course we did hear the reality of that, but I'd love to open it up to all four of you again, actually, to speak to your experience with the intergenerational support or even lack of, and how that is probably, I'm assuming that is probably one of the key factors for the success of this movement from a youth perspective. So I'd love to open that up as the last question before we start wrapping up.
Yeah, I think I can take this one. I've already answered half of it in my little speech. Yeah, I think, as I said, it goes both ways. It's intergenerational. And I think that what I personally felt was that a lot of older people were, so in awe and so inspired, and, really complimenting all of us at Youth Fusion, and, oh, you're doing the work, and we got a lot of encouragement and support in other ways. I mean, there was no problem whenever there was a little bit of money to send us to these conferences. There was always a good, representation in that regard. But I do think that, it is definitely lacking in, making in the older generation, making some space for young people to actually get the paid positions where they can like live and continue the work. And I think, I just haven't seen any effort on that. I mean, I was part of like 3 different NGOs that were never funded. There was not any efforts for fundraising ever. And, I think there's also this notion within the nuclear disarmament space. I think it's not a secret that ICANN gets all the money. And I just like don't think that's true. I can't, like, of course, it's probably one of the best funded organizations out there, but I mean, it's not where all the money is going. And I think that people need to sort of, expand the horizons and look at funding, pay attention to funding. Older people with their paid jobs who are paid to do the work need to pay attention to funding so they can pay people to do things. Otherwise, nothing is ever going to happen, and we're not going to progress. So I think that is what needs to happen. We need to pay attention to the money, and start to see what avenues. I know there was an interesting case where one NGO that I spoke to some of their team, and they branched out to the private sector, and they're like funded by some chili farmer who has too much money in California. So there's always ways. The private sector's there. You never know. You build your relationships, try and get some funding. Otherwise, people are gonna drop out, and you're gonna lose valuable talent.
Yeah, for people getting involved, I would say if you can make donations to, I think there's various organizations that we're all a part of, or donate to voices themselves and so forth. Some inspiration from mentors of mine. There's a board member who nominated me for the award named Linda Modica, and she gave a talk recently that really inspiring advice that we need to take action and do it because it's the right thing to do, irrelevant of the outcome. And part of what I really internalized from that message is that if we look at the state of the world and the dark times or whatever is going on, it might be hard to be optimistic for our future or the outcome of our work. But regardless of being optimistic, we can always be hopeful. And by that, I mean the difference between hope and optimism is that hope is we know that there is a possibility of this vision for a peace and just world. We know that that is something that can be created if all of humanity come together and we really pay attention to all of our connections and work as one and so forth. While that might not be realistic, maybe we're just planting seeds for that for future generations to achieve that vision. But that we can do the work regardless. And I'm really inspired by other young leaders, maybe a little older than me. I've had the privilege of meeting Tim DeChristopher as a climate activist movement who just in a bold moment of he was in a Sierra Club rally outside of where they were giving leases for oil and gas companies. And he walked in not really knowing what he was going to do, and took one of the numbers. He became bidder 71, and he started bidding to drive up the prices of these oil and gas leases, and ended up winning a lot of them. And the entire auction was then unlawful, and that land is still protected because that was just how it played out. It's like he had no idea what influence and what action, what impact was going to happen. Also, I'm really inspired by Julia Butterfly Hill, who was a woman at she talked about the moment that she was sitting in a meeting and they just needed a volunteer to climb up into these old growth redwood trees, sequoias, to protect them from logging. And she just in that moment was like, hey, I got nothing better going on. I'll try it out. At the time, some of these activists were spending days or weeks up in these trees. She ended up spending the next 2 years. She named that tree Luna, which is still under protection, and just an amazing story. She had no idea the relationship she was going to build with Luna, and the work or the impact of her work. So yeah, just the lesson that I'm carrying on from mentors of mine is that, yeah, the importance of doing our work regardless of the outcome.
I'm happy to follow up on what was just shared right now on the intergenerational topic. In terms of I think it's pivotal, and as Michaela said, it goes both ways. It's not just us wanting to learn from older generations, but it's also them learning from us and also giving us the space to do and carry forward. A lot of times, one unfortunate thing that sometimes we see when the broader movement is trying to incorporate kind of more young people or promote the intergenerational dialogue. There is this way of sometimes viewing youth as a monolith. And so we say youth, and so, we just bring in a young person and that's it. No. When we say youth are not a monolith, we are different individuals with different expertise, with different also just passions and interests, and kind of sometimes in certain areas, niches that we work on. For instance, if I was to give recommendation for somebody to put on a panel about gender and nuclear weapons, it would be Michaela. On climate and nuclear weapons, it would be Kekshan, right? So different people, different expertise. And so that is a very important bit for me that we shouldn't forget in the encouraging and fostering the intergenerational dialogue of the work that we do. I've been very fortunate to be blessed with several mentors across my journey and across my path who have given me the space. I think that's one thing that has made a big difference. They've given me the space and the support, right? Because that's one big thing. We can bring youth in as much as possible. We can encourage youth as much as possible. But if they're not supported, and I don't just mean moral and emotional support through work and through advice and tips, but also finances, as come a lot of times in the room. So support to go in physically and get in physically to conferences when they take place and when they happen, or just to do the work that we do. So that is what I would say on the intergenerational. I unfortunately feel the need to address a little bit of the comments. I do feel the unfortunate perception that ICANN gets all the money. I do understand that ICANN is a coalition of over 700 partner organizations that work on this work, right? So when it's ICANN getting all the money, it's over 700 partner organizations that are getting the money. So it's an unfortunate reality that there is the notion there, but I do understand, because I do firmly believe that there is a lot of this work that is heavily underfunded. Organizations like Youth Fusion should still be here, because the one thing that I always think about is the brilliant art piece that you guys did and took around. I don't think I've seen something like that by other organizations in the sector, and we've just lost something like that because there wasn't enough funding. And that was such a good way to draw people in. I still remember it now, and I would still recognize it everywhere I see it. It's so ingrained, and it was young people like Michaela and her team that brought it on board. But now we don't have such a thing, such a piece of art anymore, because youth are underfunded and because we think youth are a monolith. So as long as we put a young person in the room, that's it. But no, youth come with different expertise and in different shapes and colors and interests. So yes, let's keep that in mind.
For me, I think that intergenerational solidarity and support has been part of like how it has shaped, my worldview, because as I mentioned, the very first people who kind of introduced me to like what was going on in the world was my parents, and learning from them and seeing adults as not people, oh my gosh, it's like this separate group of people, they're all bad. Like that was never something I grew up with, because I knew that a lot of the adults who were around me were super supportive of a child in this field. Of course, there were a lot of more adults who were like, oh my gosh, what is this child going to do? But I knew that, like, from that early age, that every generation had and has its good people and those who are kind of resistant to change. And yeah, that definitely shaped my worldview as I grew up in the field, as Green Hope Foundation grew over the last 13 years. And I know for a fact that there are so many people from different generations who have learned so much from. As a Canadian, one of the very first people whose names come to mind is Senator Douglas Roche, who's like forever really working on nuclear disarmament, and like hearing about his advocacy. And I remember when he spoke to members of my organization who were like in their teens, and seeing that big of this age and generational gap, but all of these people committed to creating a better world. I think that for me, it really cemented in place the importance of intergenerational solidarity, but also that it wasn't something that's super far-fetched, but something that is actually a reality, and that there are passionate people in every single generation. My involvement with Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons as well. I think every single person on there from different generations, including Bishop Swing and all of our colleagues, I think that welcoming me into that space as a young person, and saying that, okay, yeah, like my views are valid and accepted. I think that's been really, really great as well. So, and with the work that we do at Green Hope Foundation, we always try to promote the concept of intergenerational solidarity as well, so that every single person knows that we can learn from one another, we can learn from different experiences, and then that age has nothing to do with capability. It's really just about our passion to create a more peaceful and sustainable world. So yeah, it's intergenerational solidarity has definitely been a part of how I work towards nuclear disarmament, and will definitely continue to be a part of how I work towards creating a more peaceful nuclear weapons free world.
Thank you. Thank you to all four of you for sharing. I think that's a great way to cap this wonderful dialogue that we've had today. I know we only have 2 minutes left. I do want to acknowledge that there were 2 questions in the chat, and I'm deeply sorry. I don't think we'll have time to get to them, but just to read them out, I do think some of this was already addressed. We had a question about, other than the Voices Award, what would you suggest groups to do to engage and support young people in the movement? And then there was a question right in the beginning about the intersection of nuclear weapons and the global economy, with the nuclear industry being a very lucrative niche in the global economy. So if the people who asked that question would like to take this dialogue forward, please feel free to reach out to our panelists. Their information is in the chat. And I would like to say that Joan from Voices has posted the link. The nominations, they have opened to accept nominations for the 2025 Youth Award. So hopefully this discussion has inspired those who have watched to nominate someone or have someone nominate you, clearly in what is truly powerful and transformative work. And for the last minute, I'd like to hand back to Bishop Swing in case you have any closing thoughts, or if you'd like to share anything with our panelists or the audience. And if
Sure. No, number one, thank you all. This has been very exciting. Number two, we're talking about young. The planet Earth has been here for billions of years, and nuclear weapons are 80 years old. If you put 80 against billions, everybody's young. Anybody who's dealing with nuclear weapons is in short pants and on the playground. dealing with bullies and whatever. This is just beginning. This is not, we have this. And then the last thing is that when I was thinking about the mushroom cloud, you look at the mushroom cloud and you say, wow, look what human beings have done. And then wait a minute, let's build a bigger mushroom cloud and say, well, what about the Marshall Islands? What about Western Canada? What about Nevada? What about all these? The mushroom cloud is small compared to what really is the mushroom cloud of nuclear stuff that's going on. So anyway, we have to have a bigger picture, and we're all young. That's it. Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Bishop Swing, and for being here. And I just want to extend a note of gratitude to all of our panelists here. Thank you for sharing your stories with so much honesty and courage. I think certainly there's so much to learn from your experiences, and I'm hoping that that is exactly what happened for those who were attending the webinar. And for our panelists, when you do get a chance, if you haven't, please read the chat. There have been such wonderful comments coming through and so much deep reflection on everything you've shared, which I think is a sign of a successful panel. So thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you to everyone in our audience. And we would also like, as a quick last thought to share, the Charter for Compassion is hosting a Compassionate Action Conference in May. And I invite everybody who is watching, including our panelists, to attend. And if anybody would like to present, please go ahead and fill out the application on the website. The link is in the chat. And I think with that, we're going to close off. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Here is really being able to take the ginkgo tree leaf that Bishop Swing shared in the beginning of this discussion and hold it close as we look for more ways to strengthen the movement. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anna.